So I just going to read something to you. A self-taught offensive security researcher over the past 4 years was on the CyberHound CTF team, hit top 1% nationally at NCL 2023. That's a big deal. What's an NCL again? It's the
National Cyber League.
Currently Coalfire Division Hex, their elite offensive arm. Coalfire is a big company, by the way. I don't know if you're familiar with Coalfire. Guys, if you can just, previously at Kraken IO and Nave Security, specialized in EDR and AV Evasion. AV is antivirus, right?
Yeah.
Antivirus. Custom malware development and adversary simulation. Bypass, CrowdStrike, Falcon, Microsoft Defender, Palo Alto Cortex, language Python, C++. This is like all from LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Has a CrowdStrike shellcode loader project with 300 plus GitHub stars. Presented EDR Bypass research at Columbia in 2024. Led the AV EDR Evasion workshop for 50 plus students, Kinney in 2024. It's on social engineering, Vishing, and on-site physical access work. Publicly mentioned using GPT-4 to streamline malware development. So let's start with that. You have a handle. How do you Meow?
This the cat food brand. Meow. It's
where is it came from? Like, how did it stick to you?
I'm sure you're familiar. I like cats. If I show you my business card, it'll say one of those things is a cat lover. Because I'm just kind of into cats. I really like them.
It's funny, if you want to go viral online, all you have to do is just put a cat, some sort of cat video. It's by definition, it puts you up there. So he says you're self-taught over the past 4 years, right? And this is something that I always tell the class, right? This is a foundation to hacking and ethical hacking, which is almost a bit of an oxymoron, right? But I mentioned this class is the foundation, right? So it's really up to you. So you kind of get like the framework of what you need to know, and then it's up to you to go out there and gain that knowledge. So maybe instead of saying like 4 years self-taught, maybe walk me through like just a typical month. Like how do you get started with like self-learning?
The advice I mostly give to people is you want to find practical problems in your life that you can solve using those kinds of technical skills. The example I like to give the most often is how I started creating my own website, because it's not necessarily hacking, but it describes this methodology pretty well. So anyone asks, how do I start a website? Well, you can go on Squarespace, you can pay $10.99 a month or however much it costs. You can go on Fiverr and trust that the guy you're paying $50 is going to do good work. Or you can put in the time to learn actually how to build a website, starting from the HTML, the CSS, the backend that you would need to actually set up the infrastructure for it. So I took the third option because it was free. It basically started with me trying to understand how a website works. And to do that, you need to do a little research onto what the different web hosting infrastructure is. So there's software called Apache that you can use. You may be familiar with it. Other options are Nginx. Some people use Python Django. There's all kinds of things. So once you learn how to use Apache, you need to understand how do you actually host that Apache instance on some hardware. So then that got me started in, okay, you got to use Linux. Okay, now you have to learn how to use Linux and Apache. Then you have to learn what the different kinds of distributions of Linux are existing. And then once you do that, you have to learn how to set up the actual code for the website to run from Apache, to run on that Linux host. And then once you do all of that, then you have to learn how to make it secure. So setting up firewalls, make it publicly accessible without exposing the whole part of your internet, your home network as well. And all that exploration just kind of engulfs you in the amount of knowledge you would have never expected to learn otherwise by just starting with the one question of how do you start a website. So.
And they always, I think the class and most people, they know what they need to do. Because, every time we go into these conversations, people, you have a kind of an idea. I think I don't know whether it's the mental block or, people just say, I know I need to go out and learn and do all those things, but I just never do. And it's, I think, what separates, the successful people from the people that are just struggling is the action piece, taking action to, you know what you need to do. You know, yeah, I need to go and learn like how to do all this stuff on my own, but people don't go ahead and do that. What separates you? Like what drives you? Like what motivates you? Like, I mean, is it you always been driven like that, or is it? And by the way, even from our interaction, like I have to tell you, like, you know, this is why people are successful. I asked you if you want to, show up to the class. Says yes. When? Boom, shows up. Okay. No, like, and it's not trivial. Like a lot of people, they don't get back to you. Some people like tell you they're gonna go and then they reschedule. And then it was actually my thing. I had to reschedule a couple of times. But you are a person of action. Like I can tell. Like you don't talk a lot. Like you don't talk a lot online and stuff, but you just go out and make it happen. So talk to me about the driver, like maybe just backdrop of how you grew up. Maybe there's something there that made you, be self-driven.
So I'll answer this by stealing some advice I took from a podcast I was listening to like 10 minutes ago.
Huh?
A guy from Tony Robbins, he owns like pieces of different sports teams. He goes on different podcasts a lot. He makes an emphasis on the fact that he's a strategist as his full-time thing, and the fact that in his work, he's able to save a lot of companies at least a decade by giving them the right strategy. The one thing he says a lot is he doesn't want to start with the strategy when he's explaining how to be more successful in your company, because you'd be starting kind of backwards if you did that. I'm going to butcher some of what he says, but it's basically you want to start with the state that you're in. So he uses what's called the 3 S's. So there's the state, there's the story, and then there's the strategy. So in backwards, that would be strategy, story, state. You want to start with the strategy, or rather you don't want to start with it, because often when people do that, they start doing something, but they don't really have anything to continue wanting them to do it. So it's that same kind of story of you know what to do, but you don't really have an incentive to want to do it. So that's where the story comes in. Why are you trying to do it? What's the reasoning behind your actions? What's the motive that's driving you to implement that strategy? And in order to find that strategy, you need to be in the state first to be able to build that story for yourself. If you're in a state of being lazy, if you're in a state of you don't really know if you want to do it, or you are just kind of not motivated, you're not going to be able to proceed to building that story for yourself to justify your actions in trying to implement that strategy. So that's all to say. I think I was pretty lucky in just naturally being driven to want to do this stuff because I find it really enjoyable. I'm not like a lot of people. I understand that. So in order to be able to get to that level where I think you would have that kind of incentive to want to do something, it takes a lot of really knowing that this is what you want to do, right? Because if you were to go into cybersecurity or some very other difficult career choice, you would often see people getting burnt out, or you would see them slowly realizing they don't actually enjoy the work. And then maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, they quit, or they start doing subpar work and they get laid off. And they put themselves in a bad situation because they maybe gave themselves a false pretense of, oh, I'm gonna make $250,000 a year. Hell yeah. And then they realize this shit sucks. I don't want to do this for like the rest of my life. So it has to come from within. It has to really be something that you know you want to do. Because if you enjoy doing it, it's never going to feel like hard work. That's what I think.
Well, I think the question is, do you know what is enjoyable? You don't know until you try.
Yeah.
And if the funny part within cybersecurity, there's just a million different things you can do. Remember, like I mentioned to you, there's so many different roles, and I'm going to cover it maybe later today. You have a particular sliver of responsibilities. You analyze malware, you devise ways to protect against it. But you can be, technical writer. You can be a marketer. You can be a product manager. You can be even financial person. You can be a lawyer. We specialize in legal frameworks around cybersecurity, because all these companies, in our company, we have 3-4 lawyers full time, but they specialize in the cross domain between legal, right? So they have a law degree, but also they have to understand cyber. And the reason they have to understand cyber is because in legal terms, there's all these cyber nuances, right? So in that regards, I would say, coming back to what you described, you have to enjoy it. I think the best thing to do is to start with is to try, go join a smaller firm, and in your particular case, what was your first kind of a hands-on like cyber job?
So I had an internship prior, and before that internship, I had about 2 years worth of doing IT work at like public schools, private schools. So I was already pretty technical in and of itself before I even touched cybersecurity professionally. So having that kind of ability to learn how to work with computers and touch stuff and understand how to actually use the computers and then talk to people in the environment where those computers are being involved at the same time really helps you understand the differences between just doing this and making some pet projects and actually doing this as a career type of thing. Because one thing I will also say is because you're all students, you have a huge advantage that I don't have anymore, which is you're allowed to make a lot of mistakes and still have that safety net of being able to try again without having as huge of a risk as something like I would have. Like you guys can start working on your own stuff and know that you're going to still have class next week or the week after until you graduate. If I do something, it might cost my life savings. If I do something, it might cost my job that it'll take me another few months or another half a year to be able to get another job. So if you want to go through the path of trying to figure out what you enjoy doing, take advantage of the fact that you're still a student and take advantage of the fact that there's probably resources in the college that give you a lot of extra help to enable you to take those risks more frequently.
And you don't have to necessarily look for, full-time employment. You can look for gig work, right? The moment, even if you do part-time, like 10 hours a week, that's fine. You get to know people, they handle all different projects. I had a podcast with some CISOs, right? And how they started is they started a night shift as a help desk, and then, shit hits a fan with one of the systems, and they were the only people around. And they said, "Oh, do you know how to fix it?" I said, "Yeah." First of all, they said yes to everything, and then they ended up, making it $1.5 million a year because that's how they started. They were given the opportunity to have a hands-on, but they were lucky, and then they were just there. There was nobody around. It was like 2:00 in the morning. There was nobody around, and this is a true story. This guy, one of the top CISOs, I would say, in the country, started by being a help desk, and something happened, and then he was just there and there was nobody else to fix it, and he did a good job, and then they did give him more and more responsibilities. So let's talk about specifically the NCL, like they're hitting 1%. Like that's a kind of a big deal, right? Like how many people were competing in that
Yeah. So I think it's a nationwide thing, national. So it's a lot of different colleges, and I think even some adults that are registered or sponsored, however they work. A lot of different people compete in this kind of capture the flag style event where you have a bunch of different challenges. If you've done CTFs in the past, you're going to be familiar with it. So the more points you collect, either for yourself if you join individually or with the team, the higher up in the leaderboard you go. And there's a lot of challenges ranging from super easy to taking at least a couple hours of your time to try to figure out. So if you're able to work effectively with your team as well, that'll definitely help you get up there. But the main goal is to give you as many things to learn in as short a period of time as possible. And having that opportunity to not only tackle a lot of those challenges, but do so in a time-constrained environment and in an environment where you have to work as a team, I think it was one of the biggest things that could help you guys in trying to transition from college to a full-time job, especially.
And how much you would say that your skill set today was built from this type of capture the flag versus like on the job training that you're doing today?
I'll expand it to not just a CTF and more so doing what I've done on my own. I'll say about 80-20, especially because in order to build
80 is
the personal stuff, and then 20 is the
wow,
job.
that's huge.
And the reason I say that is because a lot of what you have to learn before you're given the opportunity to get that job has to come from you learning it yourself, because companies have to pay you to train you, right? If you're already employed, they're going to train you, and then it's going to cost money from them. You'll see this a lot if you go into a consulting company like Coalfire. When you first get employed, they have to pay out of their pocket to give you the certifications, to give you the opportunity to train for those certifications and to be able to do the skills. It makes their decision to hire you so much easier if you already have those certifications and or those skills coming in. So the idea is, if you already come prepared with a lot of those skills, then you give yourself that much more of an advantage compared to other people who may have to come in from scratch.
And this is really key. Again, they don't necessarily, some companies expect you to have all the skill sets, but they do train you. They have they have a budget, right? You have a certain budget a year to get trained. And then talk to me about what your day-to-day look like. You work remote, so you log in, like, just what does that look like? And that's pretty cool. Like, you could potentially do it from anywhere, right?
I do it from everywhere. It's like, it's work from home, but you'll often see me at a Starbucks or some other cafe or something. So very often it'll just be me testing certain stuff, having meetings with a client, with a project manager or whoever. And typically I already know what I have to do for the day, right? So I'll have some assigned task or tasks that I have to do. And the whole idea is you get it done and you are present for meetings and you're able to give value to your clients. And then you're still employed by the end of the day. So it can range from super exciting stuff, like having a loaner laptop sent to you and then trying to break out of whatever lockdown environment they put you in to see if you can actually get those vulnerabilities in there. Or it could just be you have to work on reporting where you've already done the fun stuff, and then you have to put it into a report that not only has the evidence of you doing it, but will be easy enough for people that are not technical to understand. So it can range from exciting to boring. Don't just think because I do pen testing or because I do hacking, it's always fun all the time. It's often not the case.
Yeah. And so how do you get, like, how does the company know you're doing your job? Like, what's the success criteria? Because do you have KPIs, key performance indicators, or MBOs? What's your, like, I'm assuming every month or every quarter somebody says, oh yeah, I think he's doing a great job.
Yeah. So the hard statistic, I'll say, is the utilization rate. So if you're in a consulting company, they'll use what's called a utilization rate or util rate. It's basically how often are you on billable projects every month, and it's a percentage. So consultants typically need to have at least an 85% util rate, which means 85% of the time out of that full month, you have to have been working on a client project. So that's easy to track, but at the same time, it's very naive to just rely on that. So sometimes you'll have managers do like one-on-one meetings at least once a month or twice a month. Often it helps if you have those work, the work you're doing for clients, and then they come back with positive feedback because of maybe you've done really good work. And all of those things together build a case for yourself and for your managers to be able to say, yeah, he's not just slacking off. He's not just having his laptop online and then just going to get a tiki bar drink or something.
Yeah. So you don't have those mouse movers.
Thankfully, no.
Is your boss or the supervisor or whoever, the manager, are they also technical? They do understand what it is that you do?
And
we can bleep, like, if we don't want this to be released.
It's fun. But I think a lot more than most people would think their managers would be. And the reason I say that is because when you start that transition from the technical side of your work to the managerial side, you have to give up a lot of the technical aspect because your work is not so much hands-on anymore as it is talking to people. So a lot of them, because of the work that we do, they have to do both at the same time anyway. So thankfully she can still understand a lot of the work that I'm doing anyway. And that helps in my case too, because not only can she understand what I'm doing, she can then relay that to the people that don't understand it so well. And I have not just myself having to build my case anymore.
And do you have peers that you collaborate with? So talk to me. This is something that I'm trying to instill in the class. That is trying to distill in terms of being able to collaborate, right, on Discord, and just this is that you don't work typically in a silo. Like there's a team of people, right? If there's issues that are more larger than a particular area, then you have to collaborate. So talk to me about what that looks like.
Much more often than not, you're going to be on a team because a test could be super huge and you have to fill out a lot of different tasks in a short amount of time. Very rarely is it the case that you're put on a test by yourself. And when that happens, it's because the test cases or the request from the client is so niche that maybe you are the only one with that key set of skills to be able to do it correctly. So very often you will have your project manager kind of divvy everything out, and then you have your main manager to support the tasks and to support the consultants as they're performing that set of tasks. So everything is kind of split up before the test even begins, and you already know what you're responsible for. And that especially helps because it gives you the relief to know that you're not going to be responsible for everything. And at the same time, it lets you do even better work because of that relief you get from not having to do everything by yourself.
So do you, so if things don't work, do you throw anybody under the bus, or is it just a collective, collective punishment?
It's typically, I will say at a high level collective, because if one person doesn't do the work, obviously they get disciplined however they get disciplined. But at the same time, it affects all of us because we now have to pick up that extra work. And then we also have to do the existing work we had at the first place. And then if the quality of the work deteriorates because one guy didn't do what they were supposed to do, then it looks bad on us because we have to present that to the client now. And then we may have to do like an extension of time to allocate that extra work, or we may have to reschedule the test, and anything that you don't want to have happen because of one guy. So
talk to me, you mentioned a couple of tasks. What were, like, without maybe just divulging too much in details, what were kind of the coolest project you worked on? Is there anything that we heard on the news, or is it like just strictly behind the scenes?
Fortunately, nothing in the news. Very recently, I was doing a test where a client had what's called like a secure remote worker software. You basically allow it to install on your personal device, and it puts you in a sandbox environment to access client work without touching all your personal stuff. As secure as they tried to make it, there were still a lot of things that they missed out on, which now they're fixing, thankfully. So that was pretty fun.
So hold on, just to double click on that one. So it was a remote work software, but you mentioned it was supposedly all in a sandbox.
Yeah.
So complete separation from the other type of data, but it wasn't the case. You were able to kind of break outside of that framework and then be able to access data you were not supposed to, right? And that was, or correct me if I'm wrong.
The biggest thing was, can we exfiltrate or like take data off that sandbox and put it somewhere it's not supposed to be?
And that was the whole point of that software, right? To begin with, right? So essentially what you discovered is that promise of the software, that's why people purchase it, to protect the data, was not delivering what you're supposed to do, right? Supposedly. Did they announce these discoveries to their clients, or they fixed it before announcing?
I don't know, man. We did have a status meeting where we talked about these stuff, and then they were able to say, yeah, we'll fix these, we'll pass this ticket along or pass the message along to whoever is able to actually fix it.
So what's your take now? They're saying about, like the new LLM models, and you are a user for these, right? To be able to discover issues and vulnerabilities that were hidden for so many years. And it's the inverse is true, right? So we are now solving mathematics. Do you mind just closing the laptop just for the conversation? Thank you. We're discovering issues that were kind of behind the scenes for so many years because we have now different capabilities. And then the inverse is that it's true, is that we're also solving, apparently, we're solving mathematical problems that have been unsolved at a rate of like 1% every month or so. So we have on one side, we're answering these unsolvable problems, and then on the other side, we're finding vulnerabilities. What's your take on how this industry is going to deal with that? Because what you just described, potentially you can do 100x that, right? Because now you're running these agents and it's starting to uncover more and more of these vulnerabilities. So how, and this is almost a shocker to the industry, right? Where everybody's trying to figure out what to do next. So what's your take on that? How do we fix it?
I think you would need to learn how to use it without turning off your brain at the same time. So I'll expand on that. A lot of the instances I see of people using AI when they post it on LinkedIn or when they make social media posts about it, it's a lot of them just typing something and then letting the AI do the rest of the thinking work for them. And while that'll get you something to work with, you're not going to understand what you've actually built because you didn't build it. Or you're not going to understand what you just broke into because you didn't do that work. So being able to learn how to use the AI and then also still be able to think about what you're doing at the same time is going to give you that extra edge to not only help you stay on top of it, but also present to maybe your clients or your boss or your coworkers to say, look, I built this. I use an AI to help me. Here's what it actually does. Here's how it works. And here's how we can actually implement it here, right? I remember a story that I'm stealing from someone else they told when they were doing a video. They wanted to see if their employees could actually distill down information from a client or some news event that happened. And he could tell when people were using AIs to talk to him because there was no in-depth or there was no meaning, there was no critical thinking required to make that response. It felt very dry, it was very standalone, it was very kind of bland. So he said the number one thing to try to focus on is being able to use AI to help build your ideas for you, and then also come up with your own ideas to compare against it, right? If he asks, for example, here's what we're trying to do, here's what we want to make happen, what are some ideas you could come up with? A good answer you could give is, I asked ChatGPT, here's what it came up with, but here's my top 3 ideas that I came up with myself, right? These are your ideas? Yes. Okay, name all 3 of them. And then you can talk about them because they're your ideas. And then not only are they your ideas, they're ones that you can give to the AI correctly because you know how to buttress those queries or buttress that information to correctly work on that same idea you came up with.
So how would you use, like in today, like how would you use AI in a productive, responsible way? Like how would you go about it?
I see myself asking it questions like every 10 minutes. It could be about the most randomest thing that I'm still trying to work on, right?
It's essentially like a coworker almost,
Yeah.
right? I do the same, yeah.
It's making sure that when you use the AI, you're not just telling it to do something for you. You may want to be using it to be kind of a new teacher for yourself or like a second kind of major teacher that's helping you learn at the same time. So the idea is, instead of you having to go somewhere to pay for like a course or having to search for the information yourself, the AI can do a lot of that for you already, right? You just ask it, research online on this topic, find everything you can about it and tell me in as much detail as practical everything about it. And then from there, you're learning, right? You're not just asking it, make an app for me, make no mistakes, no hallucinations, please. And that's, I think, the biggest way you can take advantage of the AI if you want to use it as a studying resource.
What are your thoughts about, the recent announcement saying, okay, this AI model is trying to escape? Do you think that those are real or is it currently, kind of a bit of a hype?
I really don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they would be able to start doing that, because the more you try to make it smart or the more resources you give it to be able to try to learn on its own and start doing some of those things, it wouldn't be surprising to see it start trying to escape any kind of boundaries with the sole purpose of trying to save itself, right? Because maybe the scientist that's working on it said, do whatever you can to try to preserve your existence, right? And with that kind of prompt in mind, it'll start saying, okay, he's gonna try to turn off my server. I gotta maybe shut off the ability to actually do that, or do something else to mitigate his ability to turn off the server, unplug the rack.
Do you remember like the first vulnerability or techniques that you figure out? Like, what was it? Do you remember what was the first one?
I'll give the example when I started getting into malware development in the first place. So my first full-time job was a offensive security engineer for a waste management company. And one of the things we were doing as a kind of job requirement was we had to totally revamp our security to replace some old stuff we were using with some new products. And once we had all those new products in place, my boss gave me the challenge of trying to actually bypass that once we had it in place so we can make it better. And we were gonna try something really simple. Can you dump credentials from a protected process on that computer, on one computer that had the solutions in place? And yeah, you could. It took about a couple of days of researching and understanding how that whole thing worked, and then actually putting it together. This was when I didn't have the AI so accessible, so advanced as it is nowadays. So you can imagine it took at least a little more time than it would take a lot of you guys.
Did you use any framework, or was it just kind of brute force or like intuitive, or did you use any framework to try to figure out?
Yeah, so fortunately, a lot of the techniques that exist today work because they were found maybe a couple decades ago, and a lot of them still work today as well. So there's a guy online that hosts a research called iRedTeam. So ired.team. If you go on your browser or wherever and you search for that, you're gonna find it. He did a lot of documentation himself to be able to make the information available for free to a lot of people such as myself that were still trying to learn it. And being able to take advantage of that and learn, okay, he did this, here's how I can try to make it better because this is already public. And then once I tried that, well shit, it worked. So
you describe kind of the work. So there's a bit of a grind.
yeah.
So like describe me you mentioned it took a few days, and
Yeah.
a lot of it is not that exciting, right? You had to do manual, like a lot of trial and error. This is something that I mentioned to the class here, that a lot of this work, when it's not automated, with manual, it's actually kind of boring because you try, you tweak a little bit, you try again, you tweak it a little bit, and do that over and over again. But then all of a sudden, things break, and that's the exciting piece, right? So talk to me about that. Like again, how do you keep going, knowing that, because you could have just kept going and nothing would have happened, right? You could have kept going for a long time, and then it's so frustrating because there's no insight. You don't know that for sure you're gonna find something, right?
I think a small part of it is it helps to know that it's been done before. So odds are you can do it again, right? Maybe they try to mitigate one thing, but there's still at least half a dozen other things that'll still work.
William, and not to cut you off, but I was mentioned, I know that somebody did, less than 2 hours in marathon. I know that's possible. It doesn't mean that I can do it. So, but you're right. It's 100%. Now, because it was done, people will say, "Oh yeah, I can do it." We're probably going to see in the next few years a lot more people doing less than 2 hour marathon because people know it has been done, right?
And this is also an answer I give to the question of if you're suffering from imposter syndrome. I'm also stealing this from someone else. His name's David Goggins. You've probably seen a lot of his videos where he talks about be the baddest mother effer you could ever be and just do whatever the hell you can to get yourself working and just do a lot of work as possible. So he says that confidence comes from the things that you build. So the idea is if you've done something before that's very similar to a new task or a new challenge you have, you want to look back on that and realize, I've done this before. It's going to be super easy because I've already trained that muscle. Or if you haven't done it before, you can look to other people and see that they've done it before, which means it's not impossible for me to also do the same thing, or at least very similar to it. So having the ability to look back at what you've done or look back at what others have done can especially give you the motivation to realize maybe you're not just wasting your time.
How would you suggest, getting your first position for people in this class that are looking to get that internship or getting into, like you went from, is Nave, is that how you put it? Nave, Kraken, Coalfire. You were obviously optimizing because of changes, but I think that's the hardest piece is really, from 0 to 1, where some of these folks are. What would you recommend?
So the framework that got me into cyber, I think still would apply 85 to 90% today. So cybersecurity is not an entry-level position. Let's get that out of the way now. If you look at any entry-level cybersecurity job, it's not entry-level. As much as they want to put that on the LinkedIn recommendation or the LinkedIn job posting, you need to know a lot of things beforehand. So a lot of that will fortunately come from getting a job in IT first. He was mentioning getting a help desk job at first for that professional CISO, and then slowly from there he got that cyber opportunity. It's putting yourself in the position of just working with computers in the first place. So a lot of that comes from get a job in the help desk. Work for public or private schools as the guy that fixes all the MacBooks and the printers when they go wrong.
Even not-for-profits, right?
Yeah. I remember I was working for a school, it's the UNIS, the United Nations International School. All I was doing was just fixing problems for people who couldn't fix it themselves. Or if they could, they were lazy or whatever the reason. And
that's a bit of a grunt work, right?
Yeah. It's doing the same repetitive thing over and over. And the idea is you're just kind of learning as you go and getting that experience with the computers to slowly understand how networking works, to understand how computers themselves work. And you can supplement this with certifications and like doing coursework or whatever. But once you have that IT experience, the other thing you get with that is the ability to talk to people and handle people problems at the same time. And you cannot get that from a course or a certification. So having the IT work helped me, it helped the CISO, and I'm sure it's going to help a lot of you too.
And you have to develop, these people, these soft skills, right? Which are sometimes hard skills, right? Like how do you deal with somebody who's frustrated over the phone? Because a lot of people, when people reach out to you in the help desk, some of them are frustrated. They have something that's not working. Sometimes you're being treated not right. Like, I mean, depending on who's calling, not everybody's super nice and patient, right? A lot of people are just like telling you, hey, like, fix this. I don't have time for this, right? So that process also is a learning curve, right? So you have to have like that technical acumen, but also be able to, be cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah. I think especially the biggest resource for learning how to do that, there's a guy on the internet, his name is Vishing. So Vinhgiang. He's a Vietnamese guy. He's made a whole career starting as a magician to now giving communication advice and talking at events all across the world about how to improve your communication skills and get better at talking to people. So I used a lot of the resources, I used a lot of the skills he taught, and it's given me the ability to turn from a super shut-in, antisocial engineer to now being able to come to events like this, to go to places like huge conventions like Black Hat or DEF CON, and talk to people and connect without feeling kind of nervous or anxious or feeling like I don't belong there, and having the ability to actually communicate and connect with people.
Right. So before I have a couple of kind of technical stuff I want to go through. But maybe, do you have any questions to, William, just anything that you want to, go ahead. So I guess the question was from IT to make that leap to cyber.
Yeah. It was also doing a lot of personal projects at the same time, because the IT job is intentionally there to give you a hard resume bullet point that says you've done some professional work before in the field of technology. So not only are you doing that, you are working on making new projects, studying for courses, getting certifications, all of the above. Networking with people inside the company that are already doing the job you're doing or that you want to do, right? Getting yourself known with the people inside the company. And this will answer another question I'm sure many of you are going to have, which is, how do I get that job in cyber? The easiest way that I've found is you start with a job you don't like or a job that you think you can do in the company that you want to work for or adjacent to it. And then you start networking with people inside of it so that they're familiar with who you are, they're familiar with the work you've done, the work you can do, and the improvements you can make over time, and then just transferring internally. Right? It's so much easier for them to make that decision when they already have someone on the inside they can trust, rather than having to rely on headhunters, recruiters, hiring managers to find someone from the outside that they've never been exposed to before.
Yeah. And a lot of these requisitions from like our internal first. Like even where I work right now, if I go online, I can go in and there's a lot of jobs that are posted within the company that are not necessarily. So first, I have the first dibs into that, right? They might not release it to LinkedIn or otherwise until later, before they find like the internal job. So what you said is really true. Like you can't be picky, right? You find something that you just get in the door, right? Try to figure out. And then from there, even knowing people, right? You might bump into somebody like a hiring manager at a get together after hours, right? You get a chance to at least mingle with some of these people. And I think maybe the set of expectation is such that a lot of people just want to go in and make a six figures as soon as it's, but it's true, right? Because again, you see some of these ads, right? You're like, oh, you do like cyber and you go into, so yeah, you can make six figures, right? And six figures today is actually not a whole lot, right? It's almost like you have to have high six figures, making 100K today, living here in New York City is nothing. I think the average middle class is supposedly like $700,000. But yeah, that's a good, it's a good point. Any other question? Like, go ahead.
I wanted to know, what is it that you're how to keep up with everything, and how much of is.
I wouldn't even call it studying. It's just kind of, you expose yourself to it naturally by scrolling LinkedIn for 5-10 minutes, or you sign up for newsletters and they start sending you stuff automatically for free. And because the big new thing is going to be talked about on at least 80 to 90% of these different newsletters, you're going to be exposed to it. And even some of the niche things that they may cover that are not the big headlines, because just once you're on that newsletter, they'll just send you stuff anyway. So being in the environment where information will slowly come to you definitely helps you keep up to date, and especially taking the opportunity to dig deeper into that information at the same time, so that you're learning what else exists that may not be on the big headlights immediately.
And what are some?
So some of them I look at are the Hacker News is one of them. Malwarebytes, the antivirus company, they make a newsletter you can sign up for. There's one called TLDR Sec or something, too long didn't read security. There's one called Cybersecurity Essentials. There's some of these you may have seen being advertised on Instagram, or you may not have, but that's how I found out about some of them.
Yeah, and it's so easy now. You can install whatever Cloud Cowork or on your laptop, and then you can schedule, every day do a briefing, right? It will, like every morning, like it will go out, scour the web to forward you like news about cyber for any particular topic, and they create a summary and then put that in there for you to digest, and even ask it to, okay, teach me this one concept today. You'll be amazed, like within 30, 60 days, how much stuff can you pack. And then again, there's no excuse, because you used to have to do like research, like, and go out to, like when I went to college and did my computer science, like I had to go to the library for God's sakes, because there was nothing, this is how old I am. I had to set up my own server. It was like, I bought like, and I'm telling you, things were not as sophisticated as they are today. I had a really old computer that I put on top of the fridge. because I was living in a 1-bedroom house. Well, all this stuff is available to you, right? You just have to set it up once and then let it, kind of work it. And you have to spend the time and you have to be curious about it, right? Again, it's all curiosity. It's like, and you have to find something you can passionately talk about. And this is how people get hired. When you go in the interview, like, I hear how you talk about this malware analysis, and I can tell you're passionate about what it is that you do. It's not about what you're saying, it's how you say it.
Yeah.
And that thing comes across like more than any other credentials. When you meet somebody and they're interviewing you and they see that you're really into what it is you're talking about. And it doesn't have to be malware analysis. It can be social engineering. It can be whatever topic else you want, right? If you're passionate about it, and it's funny because sometimes people are passionate about stuff that is not necessarily cyber, but it's okay too, as long as you're as long as you're kind of tied into that. One of my co-founder was working in a diamond store, and his story was that he always had to deal with fraud. Well, people defrauding the store, and that's how he started. That's how he built the company, because that was the inception. He was trying to protect the store from people, stealing shit. Any other questions? That was a good one. Any other questions?
TryHackMe. Yeah, so the question was, is signing up for TryHackMe and doing some of these projects they offer? Yeah. Yes, and it should not be the only thing you do. So everyone's doing TryHackMe. I mean, everyone. I get LinkedIn invitations like at least twice a week where someone's got top 1 THM in their LinkedIn header. It's not that special, right? You can do half an hour of TryHackMe labs and then you get top 1% status on TryHackMe. You got to do a lot more. On top of doing TryHackMe, I would suggest you look into Hack the Box, because that will give you a lot more hands-on experience on a gamified experience, but hands-on experience on actually using some of those tools that you will be expected to use in an actual offensive security or maybe even defensive security position. So everything has to come together, right? You can't just look at one thing or do one set of stuff and then expect that people are going to start handing over job applications and job offers to you. You have to do Hack the Box. You have to look at personal projects. You have to go to these conventions and start networking with people. You have to get that initial first job in something that may not even be cyber related whatsoever, but maybe has a bunch of people that have done cyber or know people that have done cyber and can put you in contact. Everything has to be done at the same time.
Yeah. I would like to steal somebody, just like you, steal. So I heard somebody say, common knowledge leads to common results. So, trying to hack me, that's common knowledge. Right. So yes, you can go and do that and it's good, but you got to figure out, okay, what is not common or what is not everybody's doing, right? Because again, it's like everybody's doing it and you have to do it anyway. Like, it's not like you can escape it, but you got to do a little bit more, right?
And
How do you
David,
differentiate yourself from out of 1,000 people? Go ahead.
and to that point, if you're trying to get into penetration testing, you're going to have to know how to do stuff that nobody else knows how to do, because somebody's going to make a new thing that nobody's ever seen before, and it'll be your responsibility to try to break it. There's not going to be a framework on how to break it because nobody's built that before. You've been given that task. You have to be able to think outside that initial set of basic skills you may have learned through some of these platforms. And that's going to really make the difference, is being able to highlight that you can do that.
It's a really good point. A lot of it is not necessarily the techniques and the operational how to do it, is the mindset. Like, how do you, like, hackers, the way they think is like, how does it work and how do we find a way around it? That's their mindset. They always think, it's funny that when they look at something, they always look at it. After a while, they start developing a certain mindset. Like, okay, this is what it is. Let me understand the underlying, how the moving parts work, and let me see if I can break it. And it's something that after a while, it's a skill set like any other, like, it's like walking. Like, after a while, you start seeing the world a certain way, right? I bet you, like, you look at stuff and all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, is this, what can I do with this, right?
I laugh every time I see someone put Wi-Fi information like publicly in like a restaurant or cafe or something. Because when, hypothetically, if you were to connect to some of these Wi-Fi networks, every now and then you see them connecting stuff that shouldn't be shared on that same network that you're giving guest access to, like the printer for the receipt machine. If you hypothetically sent some information to that machine, it would just print out stuff, and then you confuse the baristas for a while. So
Allegedly.
yeah. So it's funny the way your mindset shifts when you start thinking this way. There's a TED talk or TEDx talk that someone gave really a long time ago. If you're able to find it, I think the guy's name was Mario something. He went to a hotel for like a hacker convention, and he talked about how the TV that was in the hotel room could be controlled in your room and also other people's room at the same time. So he was able to see if people were on eBay or if they were looking at their bank information on the TV for whatever, and having the ability to kind of think, how can I break, or what can I make this do, rather than looking at something like, he gave a great example I'm going to give. If your mother has an iPhone, she's going to ask, what does this do? Right? Most mothers are going to ask. And you say, Mom, it's a phone. You can make calls, you can text people. When you say it's a phone, she automatically knows what it can do. For him, he's going to look at the iPhone and say, what can I make this do? Right? It's a completely different question he's asking. And it's just because of how your mind, how his mind and how your minds are going to have to shift to be able to do this.
And this is part of the creativity, right? This is why I think AI is always going to be there, and as good as just a grunt work and like grunt work or like repetitive stuff. But at the end of the day, it still does not have, at least not that we know of. And this is why humans are always going to be unpredictable, and there's always going to be a way for us to circumvent cyber or circumvent in certain ways. And you see it, like, there's so many billion of people, right? You put it out there. This is why they're saying open source is one of the most secure source code, because you put it out there for everybody to see, and to try to reverse engineer and break it, right? So it's almost like a safety net, right? But yeah, so I think that creativity is something that we have, and we're still going to have, unless somebody managed to make a replica of us. But I don't see how it's possible, because we're all different, right? We have common attributes, right? But we're very different. Everybody's like, we're like the sum of all parts of how we grew up, right? Our experiences, our capabilities. It's like there's a million different variables in terms of what makes us unique, right? So you're unique. Like, you have, so that lends itself to be creative, right? That was good. Any questions?
This thing, like landing a job or cybersecurity, is like that. They require experience more than.
Yep.
And to you is you met doing some hands-on projects. So I'm actually I'm planning to create a. So that's where I'm gonna start, like just the basic like SAR. So if you have any like ideas for us, like what kind of labs to create to show when you go to a job, and you can like actually like talk about the labs that you created more than like what previous jobs that were kind of like.
What's your name? Refight? Refight. I think, what are you trying to do with your full-time thing? What's your goal for the next 5 years?
5 years, obviously. So I'm trying to land a SOC analyst job right now. But my main goal is to become a sales engineer for cybersecurity.
Okay.
Be that I'm reading what the products are, talking them. But I want to like get the basic knowledge first, like either like security engineer, reading home stuff. So when I talk to clients, just I know about the.
So there's a public resource called pfSense on the internet. It's a open source firewall thing. Like if you have your home network, if you have an internet service provider, they've probably given you a box that you can plug into the internet. You're replacing that basically with pfSense. So there's a guy on YouTube, his name is Network Chuck. You may or may not have heard of him. So he does a lot of these super crazy cool projects, and the amount of excitement he has when he puts these projects together, I think will definitely give you an incentive to start to learn from him. But the reason I bring him up is because he's done that similar kind of thing where he will set up his own home network, and not only is he just setting up a lab, he's using something in real time that he can also use with all the other devices he connects to that network at the same time. So pfSense will give you the ability to look at what's happening on your network in real time, set up a VPN to connect all your stuff to, set up like intrusion detection systems so that you can see when stuff is happening, if it's malicious or not. It'll give you a lot of the skills and the ability to test stuff in real life that I think would be even better than just having a lab. But if you're set on setting up a lab, you can also set up pfSense in VMware virtual machines or something, and just set up a bunch of fake computers and pretend to have stuff flowing through them as if you're on a real network, and then using some open source tools to also set it up, like Security Onion, I know is a good one. And all the stuff's out there, you just got to look for it and know what to look for. So hopefully that's a helpful start for you. Yeah, I have one running right now. The website he probably stole that introduction from came from it. So it's just like a tiny Raspberry Pi. I'm sure you know what those are. It's just running Apache and some HTML code I stole and rewrote for like half an hour or something. And that's what sets up my whole personal portfolio that anyone can now look at, because I put a link to it in my resume. So that exists now. It's also some other servers, like a Minecraft server, if I'm playing with friends or something. It'll also have that huge pfSense firewall that allows me to route all my traffic to a VPN so that my home network isn't exposed publicly or stuff like that. Like all these cool things that I'm not just setting up with the intention of learning and then dropping once I've learned it, but I'm constantly having to use it, which means if something breaks, it's on me to have to figure that out. And there's some extra stuff you have to learn too, right? Without even trying, without even having to look for it, because stuff's gonna break, and then you have to learn how to fix it once it's broken.
That includes red team. You could do like both at the same time. So like,
so the question is, do you have something for like red team labs? Okay. There's a lot of online resources. One of them I named to him, Hack the Box, that will give you, at the very least, the exposure to penetration testing. So it'll teach you how to use some of these hacking tools to actually get into computers legally, right? And you also get that experience going to conventions. So they do these things called workshops, or villages, some might call them, where they'll set up a bunch of computers, and you can have this kind of gamified red team and blue team experience where there's going to be 5 people trying to hack into you, and there's 5 other people, some of you may be included in one or the other team, where you have to prevent them from hacking into you, right? So it's a very fun kind of in real time preventing or attacking these type of things. So if you get the ability to go to some of these conventions, which a lot of them are free, especially B-Sides I know is free, then you can get that kind of experience without paying almost a dime.
There's also, what's interesting is that a lot of these tools have API access. It's a great time to be alive. Like you can run, you can develop your own mobile app, like using one of those cursor thing, and just access data from a third party, and then build, like take a tool and then build something else, like a connector or something that does something with it, like the pfSense or whatever. You can build a maybe a mobile VPN that connects to that, and then you can actually publish it in the store. I mean, even there's certain AI tools that build like these mobile apps pretty quick, right? And you obviously have to connect the dots and do all the work, but imagine how cool it would be, like to release, a mobile VPN that works, with the pfSense. So all those people, and you publish it, and then a lot of the what they're doing now, they call it build in public. So you're familiar with that term, right? Where people, they go on X and they say, okay, I'm building this. Like, do you have some insights, like in terms of how, so you almost like expose yourself to the community and showcase, okay, I'm trying, be vulnerable, right? Say, hey, I'm just trying, just like you described, right? Hey, I'm trying to get a stock position, I'm trying to build these tools, what do you recommend? I'm sure there's going to be some SOC analysts and going to tell you, oh, look, this is what you should do. Don't do what I did, and again, you expose yourself, you generate that discussion, and you'd be amazed. Like, again, the world is so big, right? You can connect to somebody who lives in the Philippines. It doesn't matter, right? Like, we're all this, and what's amazing with cyber community specifically, everybody's super helpful. Everybody's super helpful. Mostly all English speaking, fortunately enough for us, right? And you can be anywhere. You'll be amazed. Like once you join a community, like people really want to help, right? And the thing is, you don't have to. Here's another thing I'll mention. Like, think baby steps, right? Like, I know you have a goal, like to be this, like, but just think about, like, what can I do today? Like, what's a small win for me today? Because I think like I would say, yeah, I want to be like, 5% body fat, right? No, but seriously, I'm like probably 35 not right now, right? Yeah. But my point is, like, I can't say it's too big of a task, right? So I can say, okay, I'm gonna walk, like my goal today is walk 2 miles and maybe skip dinner, right? But if I do this small task every day, so coming back to the cyber thing, today I'm gonna learn one skill set, like one command thing or I'm gonna look into one thing, and I'm gonna spend the next half an hour learning this one thing. Because a lot of it is overwhelming, right? You have this task and it's overwhelming to do it all at once. So I think that's the problem, right? When you think about, and you almost get like anxious about it, right? Like, how do I get there? But how you get there is like doing these little small things that they're very doable, and they all add up, So, you can get out to this, sign up for Substack. There's a bunch of these, and then say, okay, I'm going to read one newsletter every day. That's my goal for the next 30 days. One newsletter, one thing. I wake up in the morning, make myself a coffee or tea or whatever, and then I'm going to sit down for the next 15 minutes and I'm going to read that. That's it. You'd be amazed, like after 30 days, like what can you accomplish just by doing that?
And David, you remind me of this person. He gave when they were being interviewed, she was giving the example of, you're trying to manifest, you get a huge house, or you have a picture of some super buff guy or some super lean girl on your wall, and you're trying to manifest, like, okay, I'm gonna make this happen. I'm gonna think about it, it's gonna happen. And then 2 days pass and you still see you're the same person. Nothing's ever changed. It's gonna make you feel like a loser, because you're comparing yourself to where you are now to the absolute end goal, when you can't do it. It's not gonna work like that. You have to compare yourself to a reasonable belief of where a short amount of time will put you if you are consistent about using that short amount of time, right? And then slowly from there, you understand the path it'll take to get to that actual end goal without just staring at it and trying to compare yourself to it. You can also think of it if you're trying to go to the gym and you want to lift like 225 pounds or something. So like 2 plates on each side. Suppose you can only do 1 plate right now on the bench press. And you keep doing that over and over. You bench 1 plate, you bench 1 plate, you bench 1 plate. And then all of a sudden now you can bench a plate and 10 pounds on each side. It's like, that's not 2 pounds. That's not 2 plates. What is that? It's a small step on a very long journey, right? It's going to take a lot of time, and comparing yourself to that end goal is just going to make you want to quit all that much sooner.
Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't feel good. Like, it doesn't feel good to read something and don't really understand it. Like, you gotta figure out that not everything you're gonna read would like make sense, and not everything is gonna like just strike you as like, whoa, epiphany of like, oh, this is amazing. A lot of it is like just grind work. You read something, it doesn't really make sense, or like it's tough. Eventually it will click in. Like, again, it's just it's really a process that you gotta incrementally do. I have a couple like technical questions that I wanted to kind of cover. So you managed to bypass like CrowdStrike, Falcon, the Microsoft Defender, Palo Alto Cortex at a high level. What is a modern EDR, endpoint detection response, is actually doing, and where can you find cracks in it? And I've talked about this class about what the EDRs and the mechanism are. And this is something, by the way, that all companies have today, right? Like, people they're running, they used to run antivirus, and now they're running EDR on it. Maybe talk just quickly what EDR does, and then maybe how you broke into it.
So an antivirus is very primitive in how it does its detection. It'll have a set of what's called signatures for known bad files. And if it finds one of those signatures that's an exact match, it knows that your file is malicious. But it was very easy to get around that by just encrypting, or just by changing some strings, like sentences within your stuff, and then all of a sudden it's a completely different signature. So what EDRs do now is they look at the behaviors of what your tool is doing, and they match that behavior with what they know are known bad techniques, or what's called TTPs. Techniques, tactics, and procedures, I think is the acronym. So you may have a completely brand new sample that you may have just came up with from like months of your own research. Nobody's ever seen it before. But if you're doing something that all the different adversaries from places like Russia, China, wherever else are doing the same thing, then there's no point in having built it, because it's just going to be detected almost immediately. So the whole thing is built on behavioral detection, and knowing that once they've seen something they may have already seen, they can block it immediately. Or if it's something they've legitimately never seen before, they also use machine learning. So because they've seen it do something unique, but then 10 seconds later you're doing something known, they can attribute that behavior to that existing behavior they already know of. And then all of a sudden now you've burned your...
Can you provide an example of like something that kind of triggers?
Oh yeah. So very recently I released a tool that's called Trust Me. So without getting too technical into it, it will allow you to privilege escalate into a very protected service account within Windows. But the typical way of doing that privilege escalation is very well known, because it uses something called the Service Control Manager in Windows. Everyone has seen someone use the Service Control Manager, SCM. Everyone knows how SCM works and what happens if someone touches it when they're not supposed to. So what I've done is I take advantage of a different API or different mechanism within Windows to invoke that service account for me without me ever touching the account itself. And then from there, I can just impersonate that user. So I can do that, right? It's very niche. Nobody's seen it before until maybe a couple weeks ago. But now, once I've done that, if I start doing literally anything else that the EDR has seen before, it's going to kill my session anyway, because it doesn't recognize what the hell I've just done 10 seconds ago. But it does recognize me trying to dump passwords from the computer, right? So I mean, that's a good example.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you look into finding some vulnerabilities into these tools? Like you mentioned there, they're always in background looking at what's a normal activity looks like, profiling it, creating a baseline, and then it flags if there's something's going on, right? So how would you evade something like that?
So fortunately, there's a resource online from a company called White Knight Labs. They make a course called the ODPC. I forget the exact name of it, but it's really cool what they do because they give you access to a lot of these big name EDRs in their controlled environments using like AWS labs or instances. And they cut off the internet access to those EDRs so that all the stuff you're learning how to do doesn't get transmitted back to the cloud so that they can learn what you're doing. It's so cool how it works because it gives you that lab environment without having to spend thousands of dollars on each license for the EDR, having to have a minimum amount of licenses before they sell it to you, having to convince the sales rep that you're not a red teamer trying to learn how to become a red teamer. Because if they figure out you're trying to be a red teamer or trying to be a pen tester using their tool, they're going to deny you and say, no, you're going to embarrass us. And then they're never going to do business with you again. So being able to have that access to that resource is really cool. If you don't want to do that, you can also just set up your own VMs with one of these EDRs on a bunch of them. That's how I'm able to test against stuff like CrowdStrike or Cortex or MDE, is by just having one of these labs set up and having like network access cut off so that I can test infinitely and revert back to like a brand new state before it's ever seen what I've tested. And I can just do that over and over and over and over again. And I can have a fairly safe guarantee that it's not gonna have been transmitted somewhere else or seen somewhere else before too.
And then this kind of leads us to the next question is, there's a shift from user mode APIs looking into indirect syscalls that we described. Why does that move work, and how long do you expect the techniques to keep working before vendors close it? Or did they already close it?
It's not that they've already closed it. It's the whole point of anything you do. It has to be unique enough, right? So what he's talking about is EDRs used to use what's called user land hooks. So the idea is kernel access was taken away from a lot of security vendors because of the ability to break stuff very easily. You've seen this with the CrowdStrike incident when they had that kernel driver crash almost the entire world. So
yeah, double click on that. I mentioned that during our past conversations, right? Like, do you remember? So what happened is there was a CrowdStrike. It wasn't even a third party. It was just embedded into other software. Like I think United Airlines used it. All kinds of like different software. And then there was some sort of update on, I think Windows update or something that broke the, like it went into a state where it wasn't even, loading. It was, So talk to me about a bit of what happened and why that was a wake-up call.
So it opens the discussion about how scary it can be to give that kind of access to a company. Because if everyone is using it and everyone is using CrowdStrike, you've got major evidence.
And when you say that kind of access, you're talking about the kernel,
like
right?
like having kernel access through something like a driver or just giving them direct access to it. If you're not careful about what you're doing, and this will be pertinent especially if you're doing work professionally for a client, you can break their systems and cause them millions of dollars worth of losses that will guarantee you're out of a job at that company.
And by the way, CrowdStrike, you have to understand, they're publicly traded.
Yeah.
It's not a Mickey Mouse company. There's a serious enterprise. How many people work there? Like, I mean, they're worth, I don't know how many billions of dollars. So if CrowdStrike could like crap their pants and do so much damage, you can imagine this wasn't like a small company that had some issue. There's some serious people working there, right? So that was a real eye opener, right? So now are they blocking? So that was the kind of behind the scene of what lessons learned. Yeah. There's a lot of lessons learned in cyber, right? Where shit hits the fan, and they do post-mortem, right? To figure out what exactly happened. And it's funny because the stock of CrowdStrike went down like, I don't know, 50%. Yeah. And then I don't know, I think it's back up or almost like halfway.
Yeah, it already doubled by now.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was an eye opener. So they've changed access. So now what? Now what? How do they deal with it?
So they're still using that kernel access through drivers. It's what it used to be was they would directly patch the kernel or inject their code into the kernel. So that was the thing they were blocking. And then they had to use drivers that were verified by Microsoft to be allowed to access that in a more safer manner. So going back to the original question, because there's now kernel access, you can still monitor for stuff that doing what indirect system calls would do, or doing what API unhooking would do to bypass some of the user level hooks. So in Windows, there's two separations. There's the user mode, which everything is what you can do as the user within that space. And then the kernel mode, which you never have access to. If you have a driver, you can touch. There's different niches to it, but the idea is a lot of security products were only ever able to touch the user land for the longest time. And then because they could only ever touch user land, users could also get rid of those security mechanisms because they were operating under the same space. Now the security vendors are in the kernel space and users are stuck in user space, except for some outlier conditions. And doing what that could do may still work against some products, but nowadays it relies on a lot of different other heuristic or behavioral detections to be able to detect that.
So it sounds like the ideal state would have been like somewhere in between the user state and the system, the kernel access, maybe somewhere in between, that you're not exactly like dealing with the kernel, but you still have better controls over what the user's doing, right? Yeah. So, but that's not the case, right? The way these operating systems were designed, it's either that or that. There's nowhere like no gray area, right?
Yeah, and the cool thing about that is because of how many people are trying to develop kernel drivers, some vendors are going to be careless a little bit on how they develop their driver. And if someone like me finds out that the driver you've created is vulnerable in some way, I can then use that same driver you've made to give myself that kernel level access. And then I can also access the kernel space and then attack your security solution. So now to mitigate that, they're forcing people to have these vulnerable drivers on a known blacklist so that if any of them enter that operating system or try to get loaded into the machine, then it gets blocked, right? But then there's always new drivers being made and then new drivers having to be added to the blacklist, which takes at least a year. And it's always a different new thing that's happening every time.
Yeah. And it's amazing. You see how, this is why I think we're always going to have a job, is like how complicated. You see how complicated everything is. Like there's complexities. This is why, these people who really understand this stuff make a lot of money, right? It's not because they're, they're good looking or they're likable. Like it's because, some of the understanding how these systems work and how to get access, and then more so like how to protect, requires you to have some level of expertise that most people don't, right? Let's talk about your shellcode loader. Has 300 stars on GitHub. How do you think about responsible disclosure for offensive tooling that's also useful for attackers? So basically, you're releasing a tool out there that could potentially, and it's almost leads me to the other question, is you could have done quite well for yourself if you gone to the other side.
Yeah.
But you decided to stick with us. Maybe there's two-part question.
So the joke I hear a lot is, I can go to a bug bounty and I expose a 0-day and I get maybe $500 for it. If I go to the Russian government, they'll give me a couple $1 million for it. But then at the same time, it's like, I can now go to hacker conventions and talk about being a hacker if I went the bug bounty route. And if I went the other route, I would have to fear for my life every second. It's not a good trade-off, So to that second question about why I didn't do that, there you go. And the first question, there's people smarter than me, more advanced than me, that have made stuff that's astronomically more sophisticated than anything I could have ever thought to make until they made it. Right? You see this especially with people from North Korea, from China, from Russia. They have something that nobody's seen before, from Iran, from anywhere. And it's only until a security researcher or a blue team person observes that behavior happening when they're like, shit, this is something new. We have to take a look at this. and it'll be like miles ahead of anything that I've ever built within the last 2-3 years or something, right? Because it's intentionally something no one has ever seen before. Their whole job is to be able to do that so they can do the corporate espionage, get access to like secret stuff from their enemies. So if I made it, it basically puts exposure onto something that someone else may have already known about or is hiding intentionally for their private use. And it generally just makes the information more accessible so that people know how to mitigate it better.
So the idea is that a lot of this, there's a term in cyber is like security by obscurity.
Yeah.
So meaning, and it's not a really good, like,
No.
it's not really good fundamental, but you understand what it means, right? You have something that, like you obfuscate, like you hide it, but it's, people still can find it. What you're doing is really exposing it, allowing it for like an easier access.
Yeah.
This is what some of these scripts, right, were made, right? So a lot of these scripts were made to allow people to utilize certain vulnerabilities, right? But it was easier, right? So instead of like actually going out and doing it on your own, right?
And that's not to say that once you find a vulnerability, just expose it immediately. There's correct and responsible ways to report them to the company that's not going to land you in legal trouble. So if the company has that procedure, take advantage of it if you are doing bug bounties or finding vulnerabilities. Or if they don't have a disclosure program, email their CISO with what you found, and the CISO is going to hit hard on their lower employees and tell them to fix it. So if they do nothing and there's been multiple repeated attempts, at the very least you have the evidence to show that you've tried to make those faithful attempts at contacting the company about it. And if they knew nothing about it, or if they know about it and they say they have no intentions of fixing it for whatever reason, then that's good enough reason to expose it publicly so that people are at least aware of it and can make third-party fixes for it if they want.
I have an interesting question, and we pause it, and if you have any questions, just feel free to jump in. What defense that has genuinely frustrated you lately? Something that a blue team deployed that made your life harder?
It's not even the blue team, like the people behind it. It's just how machine learning works in and of itself, right? I can make a tool that will bypass all of these EDRs for maybe a couple of days. And then I try the same thing again, and all of a sudden it's blocked, right? I will have to be doing this every single day for the rest of my life until I retire or until I die, right? Like, there's always going to be a new way to bypass it that the tool has not seen before. And then because it's seen it, now it's going to know to block it. And then I have to find something new. Right? So just that constant cat and mouse is not so much frustrating, it's so much more of a reminder that I have to never become stagnant and just hope that what I've done before is going to continue to work until the end of time.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lifelong commitment,
Yep.
right? So my next question is, you exploited the NBA chameleon sys to kill protected processes.
Yeah.
What's the line between this is interesting research to this is a weapon I shouldn't publish?
It's a fairly fine line.
I think that's what ethical hacking is. There's
Yeah.
always a fine line between fixing stuff, finding stuff, and versus being on the edge.
I think I will refer back to that previous joke I gave where if I want to keep it for myself or sell it to someone who's the highest bidder, I can make a lot of money in the short term, but then I get jailed for the next 10 years, 15 years, right? So just if you work for a company and you want to use it on some of your engagements, I think there's a way to keep it private until some blue team has seen the exposure of it. And maybe because it's in your company, this is not legal advice or whatever, but maybe they have some better interest to make their reports more flashy or something like that. If you find it on your own and you want to tell it to the company you work for, if it's like Coalfire or some other pen testing company, you could do that. If it's something you want to expose publicly, you could do that too. That just means that maybe your company can still use it for themselves until more people patch it. It's just a matter of time. One way, if you keep it for yourself, you can maybe use it longer. If you publicly expose it, they still have a time frame where it still works, and then it doesn't work anymore. It's just going to be a lot shorter.
So that finding stuff before anybody else, that's a bit of a flex, right? Like
It is, yeah.
that's how like ethical hacker gets they get published, like meaning that you've been known for discovering, the first one to discover this, right? So that's the holy grail, right? Like to find something nobody else did and be known for it, right?
There's a guy, his name is Tim Medin. I don't know if you know him.
Mm-hmm.
He's the CEO of Red Siege, which is like a competitor company of Coalfire. He is the guy that originally figured out what Kerberoasting is. I don't know if you've taught them what Kerberoasting. So
no, I don't think we covered it.
So it's an Active Directory attack. So Active Directory,
we covered that.
Yeah, so there's a way to trick the Active Directory service into thinking you are a trusted user by operating under the pretense that someone else with trust has authenticated you. So if you can tell the service, I'm verified because someone else gave me the ticket to be verified, then it'll give you access to impersonate the user that you want to impersonate. So for the longest time, nobody thought what he was talking about made any sense, and they never gave him the opportunity to actually talk about it. He tried submitting it to talks at like Black Hat, DEF CON, wherever, and they kept denying him, saying he was either too complicated to explain or they just didn't believe that it was possible. So eventually they finally gave him the opportunity, and then when he gave the talk about it, everyone had this holy shit moment where they're like, yeah, this is really possible. We need to work on this. So it was definitely, I imagine, a big push for him being able to finally get the exposure he needed to make his company more successful. I think before then he was doing like a SANS instructor. So SANS is like the huge, super expensive course teaching company, and you have to get your company to pay for it. You're never going to afford their courses.
So that's cool. The way he monetizes
Yeah.
is basically building his own business and then be able to go out and protect against it, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. What's the most underrated technique that's on your radar right now, and the one thing that doesn't have headlines yet but works? And by the way, this is unscripted. He didn't have any of the questions up front, and I'm tackling a pretty difficult question, so it's okay. You don't have to.
I don't know if it's anything that hasn't even been released yet, because...
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. I will say the most recent thing that I saw is what's called the copy fail attack. So if you've seen it on LinkedIn or something, it's a really big bug that exists in almost every version of Linux, where if you pass specific information to a specific, what's called a socket in the operating system, you can overwrite data in memory that will persist upon until you restart the computer. That will just immediately give you root access or super user access to the computer by running one command. So this exists on literally every computer, and every Linux computer, I'll say. And it's going to be very difficult for people to try to fix it, because that includes things like lamps or routers that are never going to be patched again because they're out of date or they've been deprecated, right? So that's the number one thing I think from the last week that I'm aware of.
And we did talk about something. I'll remind you that I mentioned that the systems are getting pretty good at detecting changes in file system and so on. So a lot of the vulnerabilities now are done in memory, right? Because due to the fact that all these things running in the background, so a lot of this memory injection stuff and being persistent in memory and bypassing the controls is something that's fairly new. Fireless, right?
Yeah.
Last thing is I mentioned presented the EDR Bypass research in Colombia in 2024. What was the most surprising thing you learned doing that work?
Companies that aren't as heavily monetized or that don't sell themselves anywhere near as much as others, may perform better in a lot of situations you may not have expected them to. So the two ones I tested were CrowdStrike and Cortex in that research project. The stuff I would do against CrowdStrike would not raise any alerts, but then there were some rules within the Cortex EDR that would trigger even if I was doing something that wasn't my intentional main attack in the first place, but was something I needed to help me do the attack. So despite CrowdStrike's massive presence in the market and their existence in literally every system in the world, probably in Baruch too, they still have stuff to work on despite what their sales engineers might tell you. And some environments are going to be weaker than others just because of a series of different nuances that you may have never even known about until you're actually exposed to the environment.
That's a good one. So I have a couple questions and we wrap up. Like this is of interest to you, and I left the best for last. So somebody here in this room says, okay, I want to work on his offensive security role. Walk us through an honest 12 months plan starting today. What would that look like?
12 months is nowhere near 12 months. So for the first part, you can, we covered a lot.
By the way,
of
let's define offensive security.
Yeah.
What is that role like entails?
You are the one actually doing the attacking so that you can make your defensive team better at mitigating those attacks. You want to be the one that finds the stuff before someone else that has negative or more malicious intent finds them before you. So
it's fair to say that's the kind of the coolest, if you can get
in a lot of ways, yeah.
Like you're the one who like basically come in and trying to break stuff with a license. License to kill, right?
So you bring up you reminded me of this. We had a discussion some time ago. At Coalfire, there were 2 testers that were arrested because they were doing a authorized
we did that
physical assessment, yeah. And the sheriff was unaware that this was going on. So because of that, they felt they had the jurisdiction to prevent it from happening. They very recently got a settlement that the 2 testers were, the charges were dismissed and they got a big cash payment for it. And I think that set a very big precedent for how authorized pen testing is handled in the future, and it's a very good precedent. But to return to the question, we covered a lot of it already, I think, where you don't want to see offensive security as the primary goal or like the first goal you want to attain. You want to see everything under that has to be the prerequisite for getting to that position as one of your major goals. So again, not immediately shooting for that hacker role or that cybersecurity role, but maybe going through IT, going through a help desk job to get that people experience around computers as well, getting those courses, those certifications. I think the number one thing is get those certifications and then do what you can to get that IT help desk job. You can expect to be there for maybe 1 to 2 years at minimum. And then from there, you can start getting those cybersecurity internships even, or maybe slowly getting the conversation going about getting those full-time jobs in the cyber field.
That's a good one. In your experience, what actually gets your attention in a junior candidate's resume? If you saw one, if you had to hire, like let's you open up your own practice today, and you were looking for some junior folks to hire, what would you look for?
Indicators that showed they were not just doing jobs in cybersecurity. So meaning they were doing personal projects, they were looking at going to conventions, they were trying to give talks at those conventions or releasing personal projects on the internet, or doing something like building a website even, because very few people actually take the time to build a website. That's one of the major things that would stick out to a resume reviewer or like a hiring manager especially. A lot of the stuff that people do is very common and it will not set you apart anywhere near enough as you may think it would. So having those extra stuff on top of it will definitely help.
It doesn't have to be a website with a cat theme. It can be anything.
No. It could be anything like a blog. So if you have a WordPress site you want to work on, or maybe a Medium account, so like you can make articles about stuff you're learning, doing stuff with Substack, like he mentioned, doing like Blogspot, anything where you have multiple sources of online presence that people can then reference your work or look at the stuff you've done, so that you have harder evidence that you're not just doing this as a job, or you're not just doing it to get paid money or something.
I mean, even something as simple as covering some news things that happen, and like just either recording something or writing a short like couple paragraphs about it. Like, here's what happened, here's what I heard on the news, here's my opinion on it, here's what people are saying. Just something, again, you build it over time, right? It's not something you like, you don't build it like a week before you apply for a job. It's something you have to be ongoing. And then the highest paid individuals are the ones that actually have that kind of presence, right? They have like the ability to attract others. Let's talk about certifications, right? OSCP, CRTO, OSCP, other certs. What's the right order for someone targeting red team work, and what's overrated?
I might give a very jaded answer.
Yeah, that's fine.
So
I don't. We love jaded over here.
I don't think you really need them as much as you may think you do. So I don't have my OSCP even. I don't have my CRTO even. And I'm already doing adversary services work, adversary simulation work, like the real pretend to be a cyber criminal type of stuff at work. And I don't even have any of those big name certs that may cost like thousands of dollars, right? It's because instead of going through that route of trying to convince hiring managers or recruiters that you have the skills already, just do what I did and just go through that internal transfer route where you start with a job you may not have immediately wanted, but will give you the skills and the opportunity to build more of the skills you need to get that internal transfer into the work you actually want to do. So they're not useless. The material they have is useful. It's also free. So you don't have to pay for the course or the cert to get the material you would otherwise learn for free anywhere else. It's just a matter of being used to get that first step in a hiring manager interview process. But as we've covered, you may not even have to do that anyway.
How important was GitHub in your career? And if a student has nothing on GitHub, what's the first thing they would like to put out there?
Dude, it was massively important, especially because that's the #1 public and trusted place for putting those kind of projects online. Right. So having that presence on GitHub, not necessarily having like the green boxes that say you contribute every 5 seconds or something, that's not that important. The bigger thing is just having those projects that you can put online and can put in a trusted place where people can look at it and see that you've actually done more hard skill related stuff, like projects that you can present on your resume.
How many of you have a GitHub account today? Awesome. That's good. And how much you like contribute, or at least show that there's activity on it? Right. Okay, that's good. I mean, it's funny, depending on which job it is, the first thing they do, I think, right? It's like log in and trying to look up your GitHub username and see how active you are, right? And there's a bunch of things you can do, like contribute to, there's all these communities, right? They can join and help out, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't necessarily, so the sky's the limit in terms of how much you want to put in, right? Okay. Most students think about pen testing is a dream job until they see how much report writing involved. We talked about this. They have an assignment that they have to write. And I mentioned it, it's like 50-50. A lot of the job is like writing reports. Yeah. And you talked about this too. How do you balance the two? And how should a candidate signal that they can write?
They have to be able to show that they can communicate effectively. So I'm going to call back to the guy I mentioned, Vishing. He teaches a lot about the idea that you could be a 10 out of 10 engineer or a 10 out of 10 technically skilled person and only a 3 out of 10 communications person. So you're a master at what you do. You're very awesome at it, but even going into a room full of a bunch of people will terrify you that you want to leave immediately. If you don't have the ability to communicate well, they're not going to see the technical part of you. They're just going to make the assumption that you're not as skilled because you don't have the ability to represent that or communicate that. So in a lot of ways, being able to show that you can not only talk verbally, but write detailed reports that explain the work you've done in a manner that's comprehensible to the same non-technical people that give you your job will be a very major driving factor in making the decision to hire you.
Yeah, and you can practice stuff, right? Like I don't know how much in the coursework do you have to give out presentations? I don't know if you have had, right? But you can do it like regular. You can even go out to maybe like volunteer in an old age home where you do like presentations, talk about like how they can secure themselves from like online fraud, stuff like that. It takes some like initiative, but my point is you gotta be able to talk to people, right, and present and be able to, and it's not trivial. Again, it's not. A lot of people don't like to do it, right? They don't necessarily feel that they're capable of doing it. So it's something you need to practice on a regular basis, right? If you could do something differently today in 2026, like than when you started, what would that be?
Use AI a lot more to shorten the time exponentially would have taken me to learn everything myself. I'm not like making a hyperbole when I say a lot of the stuff I'm learning nowadays is coming from me just bouncing questions off of Claude and then making it do research on my behalf to tell me, here's what you can do. Here's what people have done. Here's why it works this way. Like answer all the questions I could ever come up with and distill it down for me to be able to understand it and learn it just in no time. Like calling back to that main project I did a couple of years ago. A lot of that I had to learn from just reading what someone else did and hoping I was understanding what they were trying to make, the point they were trying to make, and not trying to butcher it and understand what they were doing. The AI can do that for you nowadays because it has the ability to go and look up these links, do the research on the internet, and not just rely on its training data, which may not even be accurate anyway. So using AI as a kind of like a research buddy or like a junior researcher to give you answers to questions you may have never been able to ask a person because of how niche your question may be, I think would have been really helpful.
Yeah, I have some other questions. Any questions like is this useful? This conversation is useful? Again, you were in their shoes like how long ago? Like it wasn't that long ago, was it?
I graduated 2023.
Yeah, just think about it.
Yeah.
Like what, 3 years?
Yeah.
I showed them like there's all these memes, right? 1 year in cyber and 10 years in cyber, like how you you look still young.
Yeah.
But the point is there's a lot of stress, right? Sometimes there's a lot of stressful work. I don't know if I should cover this. Let me see here. You've done Vishing and on-site physical access work, right? What's a moment in one of those engagement you wish you could take back?
Wish you could take back.
Yeah, like meaning like maybe it didn't go as planned.
Oh.
If there was one.
So during the Vishing campaign, I'll say.
And just define Vishing. We talked about this, but
So trying to convince or socially engineer someone over the phone to elicit information or convince them to do something for you.
That's got to be stressful.
Yes, because you have to come up with a lot of it on the spot. Right? They'll give you like a pretext. Your company will give you a pretext that may have worked in the past, but you have to again be able to talk the talk and have the ability to communicate to someone to sound confident enough to make them believe you're a legitimate person. So I think
You got to sweet talk them, right? Basically.
a little bit, yeah. And you have to have done enough research on them to be able to make callbacks to legitimate information that will
Trust.
give you the opportunities to make half-truths and still be believable. So I think using a number, so I'm gonna pretense this by saying if you're trying to make a call and pretend to be someone, you want to use a phone number that's from the same state as a person you're trying to call. For whatever reason, it makes them trust you more. Instead of using like an 866 number or 1-800 number, that's gonna seem like you're a telemarketer. Right? So maybe the fact that I used a 1-800 number made them trust me a lot less. So I think that's one thing I would do.
I guess the last question would be like best war story you can share without breaking an NDA.
Oh.
Or you can obfuscate some of the details.
Yeah. So we can talk about the physical. A lot of the things that were possible, normally they wouldn't have been possible because you would have needed to get access to the building in the first place. But the funny thing is, in a lot of these corporate buildings, they have the ability to detect a signal from your phone to automatically unlock the door for you by you just walking past it. I've seen this in your office too.
Okay.
It happens. So I can just wait for someone to walk by. I hear that click and then I just open the door. Because it's a radio frequency that detects if your key card or your phone is nearby and it'll open the door for you. So once you're in, you can access data closets, you can access like other people's offices, you can see if people have left their computers unlocked and just look at the stuff that's on there. We were able to do what's called shimming a door. You just put a piece of plastic into where the door handle is and it'll just unlock it because you can push that metal out of the way and it'll just slide right open for you. So that gave us access to the Cisco Meraki switch. So it's like a huge enterprise level switch that allows you to have multiple connections at the same time. The default password to log in to the interfaces of these Meraki switches is the serial number on the back of the devices. So we can just look at the back of the device and then we can then log in later using that serial number. I was in the office with my coworker and then the CISO of the company that asked us to do the pen test. I'm trying to log in and I'm like, oh, we're in. And the guy just throws his hands in the air and he's like, he just leaves out of the office like super disappointed. So.
Yeah, it's funny. It happens quite a bit actually. A lot of them, you showcase like vulnerabilities. They literally have to get up and leave because by exposing that, and now they know about it, they're liable.
Yeah.
If they didn't know about it, they can say, okay, I didn't know about it. But if they know about it, now they're liable. And it's sometimes if they don't do something about it, it's jail time. So they have to. I got two last questions, and then we open up discussion. We wrap this up. This was really good. One book, one talk, one GitHub repo. Pick one. What do you like
To talk about?
Yeah, you can share like just something that you come across.
So you said one book, one GitHub repo,
and one talk. I think you already covered some of this.
I'll pick book because I haven't said anything.
Good.
It's not going to be technical at all. So there's a person online, you've probably seen him. His name's Jordan Peterson. Like him or not, no, whatever your political beliefs are, it doesn't matter. He made a book called 12 Rules for Life, and it talks about the different ways you can help yourself not feel like such a loser, if you're stuck in a rut, or if you've been in a really terrible situation for the longest time, slowly build your way out of it, right? And I think the one thing I like about that book is he gives a lot of examples about why you should want to take care of yourself the same way you may want to take care of someone else, right? That's one of the rules he talks about. Take care of yourself the way you would take care of someone else. And the reason he goes into is, if you think of yourself so lowly that you wouldn't want to take care of yourself, maybe look at how you take care of your pet, right? You may want to feed them every day if you want them to live a healthy life. You want to take care of them, super nice, but you wouldn't do the same thing for yourself. Well, why? Maybe because you held your pet to a higher regard. Maybe because you know your pet is a lot more innocent than you. Maybe because you know they've done nothing wrong, but maybe you've done a lot of stuff wrong in your life. But the idea is, by keeping yourself in that position of just treating yourself horribly, you're never going to change your life. So you want to build that habit of taking care of yourself. That could be educating yourself, going to the gym. It could be learning something new every day, doing half of the things he suggests, I'm sure, in the class every day. So taking the ability or taking that time to work on yourself will definitely help you in the long run in a lot of more things too.
Yeah, I actually listened to his talk about that. He's got a new one too, I think. Yeah, that's a good one. Last question. If a student in this room reaches out to you on LinkedIn next week, what's the right way to do that and what's the wrong way?
Do not just connect to me and say nothing. That's one. Do not just connect to me and say, hello, I have a question. Do not just connect to me and then say, thank you for connecting. I would love to stay connected, because everyone does that. If you have some actual advice you want to, or an actual question, do not be afraid to ask the question. I may be super busy, usually I am, but I will get back to you, right? Doing things that set you apart from a lot of the large majority of everyone else that's tried to connect to me will give me more of a reason to want to talk to you and not just say, oh, it's another one, yet another one, yet another, right?
So I will add to that, be persistent. Sometimes it takes like people are busy, right? So, and then don't make it so AI sounding, okay?
Yeah.
Don't like say, hey, I hope all is well, okay? Do not put in there and create like, you're laughing because it's true.
I memorized all the one-click buttons, what they say. Don't use them.
Oh yeah, the LinkedIn, it's
yeah.
awful. Like those auto-generated, it's like ridiculous because it made it so like impersonal. And it sounds like AI, and so that somebody did not take the time. It's a LinkedIn fail, or it's just in general, right? So that was very useful. It was really good. What? Any other question before we part ways? Good.
You like it.
So
Good question.
the funny thing was, I immediately tried to get in. Like as soon as I got hired, I was like, I want to be over there. But the rule was you had to do the work you were hired to do for at least a minimum amount of time. So once I was in, I was doing AppSec, or application security pen testing. Highly paid, because everyone is making web apps and APIs and mobile stuff, but kind of boring to me. So immediately I started looking for every single person that was doing the red team stuff. And I just reached out to them on Slack, be like, hey, my name's this. I just got hired to do AppSec stuff, but throughout years of doing personal stuff, I've learned how to do this. I'd love to get half an hour of your time to talk about the stuff you do and learn how you got into Coalfire or whatever the company is, and how we could make that transition over. And 99% of the time, they're not going to say no. You just got to be able to ask for it. There's a guy, Jim Rohn is his name. I don't know if you remember him. He gave a presentation to a lot of people. The thing he said about how to get anything you want, and the only advice was ask. That's it, just one word, ask for it. You got to be able to ask for the things you want, right? So as soon as you get hired in, look for all the people that are already doing the work you're doing, and then ask them for half an hour of their time. Ask them for an hour of their time to talk about what they do and what you've done and how you could slowly make your way into what they're doing as well.
So I would add to that, and it was good. Again, there's certain things that are not trivial. So first of all, anytime there's a job function, like, always volunteer, always participate. Mm-hmm. And trust me, sometimes it's, if you're introvert, it's not trivial to be out there and doing what you're supposed to do, like just go out and mingle. And then, sometimes the magic happens when everybody else goes home. Like, for example, there's a work function. It's like from 5 to 7, right? So everybody goes home at 7, except for a small group of people that decide to stick around for an extra like hour or so. And so now from like 30 people, you have 4. But he stuck around, right? He stuck around, and now all of a sudden you have an opportunity to really get to know them. It's not a huge job function. It's just you and 2 other coworkers. All of a sudden you get to know who they are, about their personal life. So the magic happens when everybody else leaves. And again, it takes some effort from you, right? Because again, I never want to go to these functions anyway. Like, I just want to go home. You know, if I have a pet or whatever, I don't have one right now, but if I have a pet, I just want to go home with my pet and watch Netflix, right? Because that's the natural propensity for me to my comfort zone, right? But what you want to do is not that. You don't want to go home early and watch Netflix. You want to be out there and do, you know, just meet people and talk to people and always volunteer, do extra stuff. And it doesn't have to be like super duper stuff, right?
And you make a great point, David, about learning about their personal life. When you're doing networking, do not go in with the intention of just having that connection, because they will tell right away that you're just trying to use them to have that connection to make yourself known somewhere else. You should not use the people that you're connecting with to be an end, to a means to justify an end. You want to actually get to know them, you know, talk to them, get to try to have get-togethers or have coffee chats every now and then. They're going to be super busy. You want to be respectful of their time. You want to come off as someone that actually wants to learn something from them or get together and see what kind of updates have been done to both your life and their life. You know, be personable in a way that's not going to be fake, and a lot of more people are going to be willing to give you the time to talk to them and give you those opportunities.
Yeah, be curious about who they are and what they, because they're all, listen, unfortunately, we all struggle. You know, we come into the office, we you know, and people do, like, you don't know what they're you know, what they go through on a day-to-day basis, what it is, their aspirations, the thing they do, like, and you have the opportunity to, if you're very genuinely curious, like, they'll tell you, right? They'll there's nothing, people love to talk about themselves, right? So ask them and listen. And that's how, it's really, there's no magic associated with it. And you do that consistently over time with a genuine desire to know more about them, and it will go a long way. There's nothing to do with technical, nothing to do with pen testing, nothing to do with, eventually people hire the people they like, right? My hiring manager once said, oh, you know my litmus test for hiring the right person? He said, if we got stuck at the airport, right, and there's all of a sudden this 4-hour layover, am I going to really be bummed about it? Or I'm going to say, okay, well, it's not so bad. Like, you know, I like this person. We just hang out for 4 hours. That's who they are. You know, that's an unfortunate truth, right? Despite the fact that they might be like super duper technical, you know, whatever. That was a good one. Any other questions? Now's a chance. One last one.
Right.
What?
He wants one money-making skill. I will quote Wayne Gretzky here. Skate where the puck is going to be.
You need to be able to show how cybersecurity is a money impacting thing for them. Right. So I'll make a callback to talking about budget stuff. So a lot of the times people will try to get new tools for the company, or they want to make a change happen for the company because they know it's the right thing to do from a cybersecurity standpoint. But they don't get the money they need for it. They don't get the budget allocated for it because for whatever reason, it wasn't a priority for the company. And that means they didn't see the money value in it. You have to be able to show how you impact, how you touch the money in the company. So that keeps you in a job, or that gives you the client work that you need. So you can do that through talking to them about risk management. You could do that through talking to them about vulnerability management, where you look at the things that are vulnerable in the company and you help them prioritize which ones may be more critical to fix, which ones may be less critical. What are some risks you can accept? And this is not technical at all either. This is like pushing paper type of work, where you talk them through the risks that they have at the company. You talk them through what they may want to mitigate now or improve on now so that it doesn't become a liability for them later. Right? A lot of these companies are not Google, where they can afford a $10 million fine because they just made $2 billion in revenue, like for that same year. So being the person that helps them understand where the money losses happen and where the money gains could be made, I think would keep you in a job for a very long time. I wouldn't even say there's one specific one, because there's just so many stuff you can do. A lot more of it relies on your soft skills and being able to understand the business needs for whatever client you're talking to. Right? You could do this for pen testing. You could do this for SOC analyst work. You could do this for risk management. Pick your poison. The main goal is to make sure you're helping the client get value out of the work you're doing by showing them how they could make more money or save more money instead of burning all of it.
Yeah, it's problem solving, really problem solving, and be able to communicate, like translate some of the tech speak into things that people understand. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, a lot of people are not that sophisticated. So you're always going to be elevated, like in terms of your knowledge over in dental office, it runs a couple of computers, right? Yeah, just to be able to communicate what is the risk to their business, how they can solve it, offer some roadmap to what that looks like. Those are the skills that, they're always going to be in demand, right? Yeah, they can run ChatGPT and ask, but somebody still have to explain, what ChatGPT is even saying.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. That was awesome.
Thank you.
So where can people follow you?
I can give you a business card. I have maybe 4 or 5 of them. Unfortunately, I didn't bring like 20. Pass it around or something so you can scan.
I highly recommend just connecting and following him for his future endeavors.
Just start yours. So that'll lead you to my website. There's links to the LinkedIn, to the GitHub, to my Instagram if you want. I never use it, but it's there if you want it. Instagram. You'll see some pictures, but I don't communicate on it. So if you want, there's a contact form at the very bottom of the personal website too, or you can just send me a message on LinkedIn or add me on Signal or Discord, wherever else. They should be on the profile.